The idea of the Mass Central Rail Trail originated during the gubernatorial campaign of 2002, where we held a big event. There's about a dozen groups working to reassemble this corridor all across the state. And they all have their own little names. And so what we did, we brought everybody together and sort of surrounded ourselves around the idea of calling this the Mass Central Rail Trail, which sounds big, as opposed to the Central Mass Rail Trail or the Wayside Trail or the Norwottuck Rail Trail or whatever other segment there is. And so we surrounded it with the big name. And so it becomes on the radar screen of the governor. And during that gubernatorial campaign, we held a big event in Waltham. And we had 400 people there talking about this, including representatives from all the campaigns for all the candidates for governor. And so that took hold. It has now been adopted by the State Parks Agency to call this thing in its 100-mile stretch the Mass Central Rail Trail. This is the Norwottuck section. 104 miles from Boston to Northampton. Approximately 85 miles are now in public protected status. One of the things I've done, I've set up a land acquisition company to swoop in and buy a corridor to block it from being sold to adjoining landowners. And so things are knitting together. Perhaps 8 more years it'll be all done. Be able to bike from Northampton all the way to Boston, and vice versa. The original railroad bridge was taken out during the reconstruction of this Norwottuck Rail Trail section of the Mass Central. Well, this is Snell Street in Amherst, which is below us here. And this is an actual bicycle pedestrian bridge that was inserted into its place. Behind me, this is a development built probably 10 years ago now by Doug Cole. One of the premier builders in the area, built very high quality, beautiful houses, not cookie cutter in any fashion, and largely built with hardy plank siding, not vinyl, not aluminum. Hardy plank, looks like wood, cuts like wood, nails like wood, but holds this paint for 20 years, and it's just a very nice detail. Coming up here is Swift Way, a spur off the main trail named after Art Swift, who used to be a professor at UMass Amherst in the mathematics department, if I remember. He was a very well-loved fellow and had a hand in getting all the trail network here built. He was a leading advocate in the commuter bicycle transportation world, and after he passed on, the trail Swift Way was named, and it goes right into the university. It's parallel to University Drive, right into the heart of the university. As a matter of fact, probably 15 years ago, I spoke at a national conference about how to convert purely recreational trails into utilitarian or transportation trails. And I talked about this spur being developed at that time. It's a rail. This bridge above us used to be an automobile bridge. Passenger railroad station. It's now owned by the Amherst Farmer Supply, which is a building materials dealer. There's only a handful of stations still left in New England that have the semaphore signal up there. In the days before telephones, radios, before telegraphs were common, they used to control train movements by the semaphore, and if it comes down one step, I guess, that would be caution. And when it's all the way down, it's green, and that would be go. Interesting little bit of history here. A little bump out here is where the dispatcher would be. This red metal roof is fairly new, still standing. There's actually a railroad siding at the freight house down below back there, and as you can see, we're going downhill here. This was built as a rail trail, opened in 1993. In 2004, John Oliver set aside some money to rebuild it. Now there's a big wide tree. That tree's probably 50 years old. But for the most part, the trees that are close to the trail are much younger than that, maybe 30 years old. Because the railroad kept them, trimmed low down. Station Road. Boxcars are typically, and coming this way is actually heading north, back to Canada actually. The empty lumber cars, typically you can tell, depending upon the direction, if it's a loaded train or not. Usually eastbound and southbound are loaded cars, northbound and westbound they're going to be empty. Because this is a consuming side of the nation as opposed to a producing side of the nation. This was extended in the late 90s, early 2000s. This section, which operated until the early 80s, merged up with that active track to our left. Well, they call this section of the Mass Central Rail Trail the range view because of the view of the east-west mountain range. So it's a notable fixture here on the trail in Hadley, Massachusetts. It's been a fun day out here with the town, and continuing on our journey.